Part 2 of the Jesus Myth, the case against the historical Jesus. You can find this at rationalrevolution.net. Type that. And it says the letters of Pilate, letters from Herod Antipas, and letter of Agabar, letters of Cathias, and testimony of Thaulusas and Philogon. Okay. All of these supposed evidence from the time of Jesus are universally accepted by scholars as fraudulent or corrupt. But some of these supposed evidence for the existence of Jesus and more have been relatively recent forgeries produced at various times from the Middle Ages through the 20th century. As early as the 2nd century, forged letters from Pilate began circulating. One of these letters was written that it was supposedly from Pilate to the Roman Senate, detailing the events of the execution of Jesus. Other supposed letters of Pilate were confessions and corresponded with Herod Apontus. The period from the 2nd and the 4th century saw a large volume of writings about Jesus, with various anonymous writers adding many elements to the story of Jesus. Many of these writings are including that we will commonly call the New Testament Apocrypha. It's a Catholic canon, that's right. The Apocrypha includes things like the Gospels of Judas, the Acts of Pilate, and these types of works were written for various reasons and range from people simply wishing to write the popular works or fulfill out elements of the story, the political reasons and desires to shift the public and perception of various groups such as Jews or Romans, to attempts to further establish the legitimacy of Jesus. Many of these works have been deemed inauthentic by the church basically from the beginning, and modern historians confirm that they are written from imagination based on other script. That's what they always say, and are not themselves of any historical value. Other attempts to the volume of clearly surplus writing that took place in the early histories of Christianity. They don't accept that because they in idolatry. They idolatrous. Other doctrines such as such as the supposed testimony of Philogon or Thallus have been accepted by the church at various times, but are now widely debunked as historical inaccurate, as already discussed. As even more throughout the discussion of this can be read via the link provided in the afford President list of false accessions. Philo, a prolific Jewish writer who lived, like we said, from 20 BCE, I just already did him, of Alexandria. He wrote the New Testament, wrote extensively about the political and theological movements throughout the Mediterranean. His views foreshadowed the Christian theology, yet he never once wrote anything about Jesus. Not only this, but he actually wrote about the political conflicts between the Jews and Pontius Pilate in Judea. Okay? Of all of the potential witnesses to the life of Jesus, Philo of Alexandria deserves a special attention. Some of the reasons that Philo deserves special attention include Philo's writings foreshadow Christian ideas in many ways. Almost all the works of Philo are preserved. Some of Philo's writings may have been used by authors of the good spells, known as the Gospels. God means good. And spell, like a trance. I ain't talking about a spell like something else, spell something. I'm talking about spell put you in a trance. It's in the dictionary somewhere. Because there's many dictionaries on spells. That's why I call it the good spell. Philos of life perfectly spans the supposed life of Jesus, who was community leader and active in social movements of his day. Philo reported on the political religious events of his day. That's another way. And Philo provides the only contemporary accounts of Pontius Pilate in all the ancient literature. Philo personally knew several historical figures in the Jesus story. Philo, who surely have written about someone like Jesus Christ if we have known of him. These are all the lists that goes of Philo of Alexandria. Philo was a Hellenistic Jew. He was an Edomite. He was a Hellenist. Okay. Most of you know what Hellenists are. They were Greek. So his people conquered Grecia. Okay, who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, but traveled throughout the empire. It's basically the Greek Empire. He was the Edomite. Okay, and Philo appears to have had both a Jewish and Greek education. He was the Edomite as well, for he demonstrates that he was well versed in both schools of thought, which he merged into his own worldwide view. We know that Philo traveled to Jerusalem, because we call it Jerusalem or Jerusalem. That's what we call it. At least once, and he also traveled to Rome in 39 CE as a head ambassador of the Jews to address complaints about the practice of putting statues of Roman emperors in Jewish synagogues. Philo also made donations to the Temple of Jerusalem as well. In addition to all of this, Philo was the grandson of Herod the Great, and he knew Herod Agrippa the First, to whom he personally loaned money. Agrippa was the king of the Jews of Judea from 41 to 44 CE. The king of the Jews is really Herod, was the king of the Jews as well. Philo's brother was also involved in government. Philo's whole life was immediately and immediately tied to the politics events of the region and the Jewish communities throughout the Roman Empire. These were Edomites, joining with Edomites, I guess. Okay, in 40 CE, Philo wrote on the embassy of to Gaius, in which he mentioned in Pontius Pilate, and Gaius referred to the emperor and Caligula. Emperor Caligula, who was a Roman emperor, the Edomite as well. Not only does this work discusses the region of Pontius Pilate in Judea, but it also discusses a number of ideas and demonstrated Philo's deep concern for and acknowledge of his issues directly related to Jewish and religion. Below is the portion which discusses the reign of Pilate. And it's the lexicon. I think it's the 37. Page 294. But why I need to invoke the assistance of foreign witness when I have plenty whom I have can and furnish you from among your own countrymen and friends. Marcus Agrippa, your own grandfather, on the mother's side, on the moment that he arrived in Judea, when Herod, my grandfather, was king of the country, thought fit to go up from the sea coast to the metropolis, which was inland. In page 295, you can read that for yourself. And when he hold a temple and he's talking about things like that, you can read this. And I'll read this on the end, page 298. And it says, "What again did your other grandfather, Tiberius Caesar, do? Does not he appear to have adopted an exactly similar line of conduct? At all the events during the 3 and the 20 years that he was emperor, he preserved the form of worship in the temple as it has been handled down from the earliest times, without abrogating or altering the slightest particular of it." So, this guy did some damage, man. I mean, he wrote this and made lies off of it. But he did some damage to our minds, man. And whoever wrote the New Testament was smart. They were clever. And I'm reading these guys now. Here, Philo has obviously demonstrated an in-depth knowledge of the affairs of Judea during the rule of Pilate. And he does mention various executions that take place under Pilate. Interestingly, however, Philo's accused Pilate of being a cruel and bad ruler. Yet in the Gospels, Pilate is portrayed as a fair and concerned ruler who is forced to have Jesus crucified against his own will by the Jewish mobs. That's what they say, quite to the opposite of the situation that Philo describes, While it may or may not have been appropriate for Philo to have mentioned Jesus in this particular writing, he demonstrates in any depth of knowledge of the happenings in Judea under the Pilate and in concern for the issues of the justice and religion. If Jesus existed as described in the good spells, known as the Gospels, that's what they call it the Gospels. I call it the good spells. They put a spells on people, and then surely Philo would have known about him. Philo have a personal knowledge of all the main historical figures in the gospel stories and personal interesting in the ideas that were later expressed in the good spells. If Philo had known about Jesus, he has surely would have written something about him. However, we see writings from Philo, such as on the embassy of Gaius, which give no indication to any special happening in Judea during the time when Jesus was supposedly preaching and was killed according to the good spells known as the Gospels. Many of Philo's ideas also influenced later Christians and were revered by them, which is the main reason why virtually all of this works survive. Clearly, Philo's ideas were in line with Christianity in many ways. One example of Philo's discussion of the creation. And Philolaus gives his testimony to this doctrine of mine in the writing words for God, and said, He is the ruler and the Lord of all things, being one, eternal, lasting, immovable, himself like to himself, and different from all other beings. He wrote this. A trustees on the account of the creation of the world as given by Moses, Philo, it is plain thereof that the creator of all created things and maker of all things that have ever been made, and the governor of all these things which are subject to the government and necessity, being universal knowledge. And he is the truth, the Father, the creator, the governor of all things in heaven. And sometimes a long interval, and that's page 31, but God is the creator of the time also, for he is the father of its father, and the father of the time is the world, which made its own mother in the creation of time, and so that the time stands towards God in a relation of grandson, for this world is younger son of God, inasmuch as it is perceptible by the outward sense, for the only son he speaks of as an older than the world is idea. On the unchangeableness of God of Philo, you can read that. And he says, I want to read that. Unchangeableness of God. Philo wrote this, and he said, For God, while he spake, the word did at the same moment created, nor did he allow anything to come between the word and the deed. On the birth of Abel and the sacrifice offered by him and by his brother Cain. Now this image of God is the word by which all the world was made. And it compares in 1 John and things like that. I ain't gonna get that, but this is Philo Alexander, and this is right there. And it says, and we're mocking this now. This is probably what he would have said. Mocking of the individuals as kings was apparently not an uncommon practice during this period, so it cannot be certain that the writers of the good spells drew, especially known as gospel, specifically on this writing by Philo. But the similarities are remarkable. From all of this, we can see that Philo was a prime candidate to be the independent witness to Jesus Christ. Philo was aware of the goings on in Judea. He personally knew the historical persons associated with the story. He is our only contemporary source of information, and Pilate was interesting ideas expressed in Christianity and profiling events and took place in Jewish communities in the Mediterranean. Virtually all of the works and preserved, and yet despite all, not only of this, and he does mention But in this is nothing of his writings indicate that anything remarkable happened during the time, supposed time of Jesus. But this is called an argument from the absence of, but this is a striking example of what the works of Filio and also justice demonstrate, is that we have a quality source of potential independent witnesses to Jesus. It is not though that we are lacking potential sources, but there are no mention of Jesus Christ. He was an idol. Harking on to the word, people. Harking on to the word, Yahshualites. Like it said, make me your fear in Yeshua 8 and 13. Tells you that. Okay. All the non-Christians' reference to Jesus can be shown to have been either been introduced later by the Christian scribes or were originally based on Christian claims. There are four primary non-Christian potential references to Jesus Christ in the existence literature. All of these references are in the works, and they are written after the Gospels have been written, and it was as well with all ancient works. They come down to us through a long line of translations and hand copying. Oh me. Okay, in the letter of the part of the 2nd century, and afterwards of Jesus Christ was written about interesting numbers of the people. However, these later references are acknowledged by scholars today to have been based on the regular circulating stories about Jesus from the Gospels, not in the independent accounts of Jesus. The four main potential sources for independent accounts of Jesus are as follows. Antiquity of the Jews by Josephus, Titus Flavius Josephus, written in 94 CE, two separate references. The Annals by Tacitus, written in 109 CE, letter by Trajan by Pliny the Younger, written in 112 CE. The Lives of Caesar by Suetonius, written in 120 CE. The four sources listed above have been long recognized as primary documents, potential additives of the historical evidence of Jesus, existence of Jesus. But they are the same four sources listed in the 1910 copy of the Catholic Encyclopedia, which is accessible on the internet. That's what it is. Catholic Encyclopedia, early historical documents on Jesus Christ. That's what they say. But first, let us tackle the reference in the work of, that's what they said, tackle this right here. And it's a lot of information. Pliny the Younger. Suetonius, The Lives of Caesars. This is going to be a long one. This is going to be part 2. I'm going to make this one short. Lives of Caesars. You can check this out, rationalrevolution.net. I don't have to read all this because most of you know all this stuff. I'll get this another time. Josephus Antiquus too. I did videos on him. This is good information if you can read It's a lot of reading. Life of Flavius Josephus. They said he was the Messiah. There's a lot of good information, writings, infos, and things about Christ. Even though he's an idol, it's been proven. I'm going to development of the Jesus myth. I'm going to get this real quick. The Jesus myth. Development of the Jesus myth. I'm going to get this real quick. Okay, the questions then arise: if Jesus did not exist, then how did Christianity and the story of Jesus develop? This is a subject that certainly requires more research, and the questions cannot yet be answered in full detail, nor may it ever be. But a general outline for the development can be laid out. Development of apocalyptic and messianic traditions in Judaism. That's a form of idolatry, just as it is. The sins of Esau created that, but now they're in Christianity and Islam as well. They destroyed Judaism and then they promote wood and stone now. And it's manifesting as we speak from the 6th century BCE to the 1st century CE. And here's number 2, the fusion of the apocalyptic Messianic Judaism with Hellenistic culture, Greek culture. Greek-speaking Jews, Hellenists, Edomites. So they created Judaism. By the way, those are the sons of Esau, known as Mesorets, that translated this book and tampered with some of the Book of Remembrance and give us a false book called the New Testament that was prophesied in Deuteronomy 32 and 17. That's what they was going to do to us, Yashrualites. That's what they was going to do. Scatter us 4 corners of the earth, and we was going to worship wood and stone. And most of our brothers are scattered amongst the nations in Yeshua 11 and 11. And that's the people that he's going to get, the true descendants, the true seed of Yashua. I know it says Israel in your Bible, but it's true seed of Israel. That's who he's going to get. The Most High is going to get and gather us. Not some idol like is mentioned here. It says development of the flesh-based Christ theology with the mystery religion. That's number 4 it mentioned. But it says the merging of Jesus Christ was a mystery religion among the Hellenistic Jews. So Esau created that. Okay. Here's number 5. Number 4. It says writing of the allegorical Christ narratives. Here's number 6. Of the pseudo-historical Christ narratives. That's number 6. Number 7 is development of the defense of the historical Christ theology. Development of the post-canonical dogma. That's number 8. And number 9 is the elimination of the remaining non-historical Christ theologies. Understanding the development of Christianity, of course, requires an understanding of Jewish history. The sons of Esau, that's what they call themselves, Jewish or Jews that run the world, the sons of Esau. The Jews people were, for the most of their known history prior to Christianity and afterwards, for the matter until recent times, the oppressed subjects of other people. This had a certain effect on the character of the Jewish religion and cosmology because of the oppressed nature of the Jews. Themes of suffering, saviors, and salvation became important to their culture. Jewish culture was, at the same time, quite fragmented. The monotheism, it's another form of idolatry, religion. That's why you got all these 3 religions. But those religions is wood and stone. Esau created that and got it from other sources from ancient kingdoms, so their idols and images of the Jews actually led to quite a bit eternal conflicts. And we see in the Old Testament many stories, it's not really the Old Testament, it's really the Book of Remembrance, okay, about the conflicts those arose between the Jewish tribes and blah blah blah. But actually they're not Jewish tribes. They don't have the history in the Old Testament. They understand the Book of Remembrance. Those are not their book. They tampered with the Book of Remembrance. Okay, so I'm gonna skip that word tribes. There was Jewish tribes, Edomite tribes. It's not our people, because some groups are personally was not worshiping God correctly or worshiping a different God. That's what they say. They try to use our words. But like these Jews developed a very scriptural based religion, unlike many religions in surrounding civilizations which were less strict in nature. The Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, for example, have no Bible. A lot of people say they don't have no Bible. That's true. The Romans didn't have no Bible, but the Jews did. Remember, Jews were Greeks and Romans, not Egyptians. The Egyptians were Hamites. Okay, but the Ptolemies mixed with the Egyptians, the dark-complected people, for example, have no Bible that we can refer to examine their religious beliefs. But these cultures didn't have a strictly defined religious beliefs. Their religion were instead of more open and pertain more to ritual. Religion also played a larger role in the Jewish culture than it did in other cultures, such as the Greeks. Among the Greeks and the Romans, law was secular cosmology, and a natural world were understood through philosophy and science and ethics and morality were also under the domain of philosophy among the Jews. However, all these things fell under the domain of religion. As the Jewish historian Josephus, Flavius Titus Josephus, noted in his work against Apion, and you can read that for yourself. I don't even have to get that. That's by Flavius Josephus, and he said the oligarchies, and the Republican form, all that. He created that stuff. Within the Jewish literatures, there were traditions or tendencies to reinterpret older stories and draw to references to older stories when writing new stories. There was also a history of writing pseudo-prophetic literature that foretold and fulfilled prophecies, and within the same work, where the same author wrote of prophecies and then they also wrote their fulfillment. Much of the Jewish history is written using prophecy after the fact, where in telling of the history of the actors and narratives give prophecies, and then the narratives plays out of those prophecies. In the 4th century BCE, the Jews, the Edomites, who had been semi-independent for about 2 centuries, were conquered by the Greeks, they say. That's a lie. The Greeks conquered the Israelites, the true descendants of Palestine. And this began wider integration of Jewish and Hellenistic culture. They didn't really conquer them, they really joined them. I got information on that on Flavius Josephus, by the way. From the 6th century through the 1st century, primary residence of Jews was in the region of Israel. But during this whole time, the Jews also spread throughout the Mediterranean with the conquest of Alexander the Great, integrating of Jews, they say. Well, Alexander the Great, you got to remember, he was an Edomite, he was an Agagite, he was a Malachite Edomite. And a lot of you people don't understand that's who he was, and then he was trying to integrate his brothers into religion in Hellenism, known as Hellenistic Greeks or Jews people, into other cultures increases, and the Jewish religion became increasingly weakened through cultural competition, conversion of Jews to other religions. And here's the book of Maccabees. This is the process recorded discussing in detail many of the writings of the Hellenistic period, both the scriptures and secular historical documents. One example, this is recorded in the book of Maccabees, the book of First Maccabees, which documents the conquering of the Jews by Alexander the Great. Really, he was an Agagite Edomite, if you really do your research. In those days, lawless men came forth from Israel, misled many, and said, "Let us go and in the covenant with the Gentiles around about us. For since we are separated from the many evils have come upon us." And this proposal pleased them. And some of the people eagerly went to the king. He authorized them to observe the ordinance of the Gentiles, they say. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to Gentile custom, and removed the marks of circumcision, and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold them to the evil. Then the king wrote in his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and which should give up of his customs. All Gentiles accepted the command of the king. Many even from Israel gladly adopted his religion. First Maccabees was written 100 BCE. During the Hellenistic period, wide ranges of Jewish cultural practices development with the whole spectrum of the Jewish integration and Hellenistic culture, from some Jews who completely abandoned their tradition and religion and culture, to some Jews who partially adopted different religions and cultures while also maintaining some of their traditional beliefs and customs, and some of the Jews, mostly those living in and around in Jerusalem. That's the sins of Esau, not us, who did that. And this is good history. You can find it at rationalrevolution.net. And with various Jews criticizing one another for their cultural practices, the Jews who integrated into other cultures criticized those who did not for being abstaining backwards. And those who didn't integrate criticized those who did for the abandoning their God and their heritage. In the 2nd century BCE, after the Greek interference with the Jewish religious practice, Judas Maccabeus was an Edomite, defeated the local Greek army because he was helping Ptolemy Soter. That was the prophecy in Daniel. Established an independent Jewish kingdom known as the Hasmonean Kingdom. The Hasmonean Kingdom was the Edomite kingdom. They were the Edomites, but the Agagite Edomites were a tribe of the Amalekites. So Philip Macedonian was an Agagite. He was an Edomite. Had somebody killed him. And the sons of Esau, their brothers, killed him, and Ptolemy killed him, and Ptolemies were Edomites as well. So people get confused. They were all Edomites. Like I mentioned in Daniel, in the series in the statue, the dream king Nebuchadnezzar. And the Roman governors and things like that, theocracy ruled by members of the Maccabees family. This was a period of independence, last less than 100 years, after which the Jews were reconquered by the Romans, are ruled as semi-autonomous province. King Herod, the King Herod the Great, he was the Edomite, was the first of the Roman-backed Jewish kings who pursued over Judea and in concert with Roman governors. By the 1st century CE, had spread through much of the Roman Empire. This is what is known as the Jewish, known as the Jewish diaspora. They say that's a lie. It's really they wasn't dispersed. Our people was dispersed 4 corners, not them. It's black diaspora. But the dominant language of Jews by the time was the Greek, not Hebrew or Aramaic. The original Hebrews were scattered 4 corners, so that would be your Israelites. They're not Jews. There's a difference. They're Hebrew Edomites, claim to be us. They don't use the word Israel. Have you noticed that the key word is Jew? So the Greek was the language that was spoken by virtually all Jews who lived outside of Judea. They lived in the land of Edom. They were Idumeans, Edomites, surrounding the area. Even many Jews in Judea and knew at least some Greek. Told you. They spoke Greek. If you spoke the prophecies. And this is why I stated, and they talk about the Septuagint, diaspora of, a lot of people said the real Jews. They said no, they were Israelites, not Jews. And Jews conquered the Babylonians, liberated the Persian King Cyrus, and they trying to use things like that, events. This is a lot of good information. These were Edomite people. By the way, they're not going to show you the real pictures. It's a lot of information. Yeah, Edomites done put statues and idols and images. You can check this out at rationalrevolution.net. It's a short one. It's a lot to read. Please get the information. And this is my part 2 of the Jesus myth. So with that, I want to say may Yah will bless you many times.